You are the hero. These words might not mean anything to you today, but if they do, they might have been the door to a whole world of tabletop adventure. Founded in 1975 by three friends from the English suburbs, Games Workshop was the retail and mail order destination in England for board and role-playing games. If you imagine Whaling games of today or Miniature Market for North Americans, that was much closer to who they were and had grown into. That whole adventure, though, is a story we can go into another time. Today, they are a multinational corporation that trades in all time zones. I once heard it said unironically while working there, the sun never sets on Games Workshop's empire. But the business was really different back then. They imported Dungeons & Dragons, they sold and produced their own board games, and they had recently formed a partnership with a small company's founder, Asgard, to create their own in-house casting facilities. After 7 years of struggling, success, and bringing Dungeons & Dragons to both Europe and England, things were about to change. In January of 1982, the two remaining partners got a letter from Penguin Books offering them a publishing deal. It was for a series of books that they had conceived that would allow you to capture the magic of their most popular import, the one that had built their business, Dungeons & Dragons, into an experience that anyone could enjoy. No one could have predicted what would happen next. By 1985, the two were best-selling authors, along with trying to run their retail and mail order empire. And they had a problem. One of their employees, Brian Ansell, with whom they had formed a subsidiary to cast miniatures called Citadel, and upon whom they were leaning heavily while they went on book tour after book tour, had just mutinied and resigned again. Unfortunately for them, this was a rather common occurrence. He tended to resign and had a habit of doing this whenever he wanted something. So Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson found themselves at a crossroads. Which way would they choose? Turn to paragraph 97 if you want to live the life of best-selling authors touring around the world. Turn to paragraph 13 to go back to the boardroom and stop all the infighting happening in your company. It clearly wasn't an easy choice. Ian and Steve loved the people that they worked with, but they chose Fighting Fantasy. Brian became managing director, and Ian and Steve took a back seat. By the end of the 80s, the focus of the business was pushing further and further towards Citadel products. In 1991, a buyout of the last two founders and everything not Games Workshop left their stores. You probably know the rest of the story. Games Workshop grew and grew. They became the IP management brand that they are today. Citadel Miniatures dominated the market and manufacturing of toy soldiers across the planet. But Steve and Ian weren't done. They went on to sell over 20 million more books. They mainstreamed role-playing games for a whole new generation and taught people that at the table and in a book, you could find adventure. So that was the moment. These books put a self-professed maverick at the helm of Games Workshop. Someone that thought that they could do the impossible and build an empire to toy soldiers. And it turns out they were right. But without that letter in 1982, none of that would have happened. Without Fighting Fantasy, you wouldn't have Games Workshop the way it is today.
And then just post an angry video threatening to stop showing the cups if they don't start sponsoring you.
Just be like, they stopped paying me a royalties.
This video is brought to you by Coffee Time. How do you feel about that, Tim Hortons? How do you feel about that?
Switching to second cup.
Fulfilling your Canadian content obligation.
That's right, yeah. As we're just sitting there eating pizza and drinking second cup coffees. I mean, Tim Hortons, I don't think.
Oh man, this Swiss Chalet is delicious.
I could really go for some Saint Hubert right now. get my French language content in.
I was going to say,
can we go get some smoked meat at Dunn's?
I was going to hit a convenience store, but I couldn't find a couche-tard in the area.
That's right. The Avondale and Becker's were both closed. Hey, everybody. Welcome to You're the Hero, because this is where we talk about Canadian brands you mostly don't have any idea what we're talking about. I'm so excited for this one, man. I'm going to drink my coffee. I'm going to put that here so people don't have to see it.
I like that we just do one inside joke that like 5% of your audience would get. And
it's what the cold open's turned into, basically. The cold open is just now us talking about absolute nonsense.
I'm riffing,
baby.
It's jazz, baby. It's jazz.
How many times are we going to say that?
Until I latch onto some new phrase, yeah.
or until all the subscribers leave.
Right.
This one's really near and dear to both of us. I think I've been more I have never figured out a way to do this properly. I tried during the pandemic at one point making solo content to do something related to this.
Right.
But this is such an important thing in my personal hobby journey and actually in our friendship, because our Double Dragon amulet moment was when we both realized that we were obsessed with these and that they're part of our
Hey,
life.
there's a book in this series nobody's ever heard of. What do you mean nobody's ever heard of it? I have it. I have it.
That's right, yeah. Is this our villain
Dun, dun,
origin or
dun.
our
Yeah,
hero
exactly.
origin story? Well, it's supposed to be You Are the Hero. And for those of you who do not know what we're talking about, we are talking about the, I want to say, probably the thing that Games Workshop's founders are best known for, and like, I'll bug in here, that is not a Games Workshop game. And that's Fighting Fantasy.
Fighting Fantasy.
Not that book in particular, but Fighting Fantasy, which was a choose-your-own-adventure game written by Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson right after they were basically becoming business partners. And here in North America, it was published by Puffin. And that meant that we got stuff like slightly after,
Yep.
I guess the UK did. But this was a hugely, I would say, like foundational part of, especially in the UK and in my life in Canada, RPGs breaking into like a slightly more mainstream environment.
Yeah, in the early RPG scene in Canada, at least where I lived in Canada in Southern Ontario, you had game stores, you had these little niche stores that carried weird stuff that no one had ever heard of. But if you went into like a big chain bookseller, the only RPG things you had any chance of finding were they started carrying D&D books when Advanced D&D and the Red Box Basic Set came out, and Fighting Fantasy. That was it.
So this was in my public library. This was in my school library.
Yeah, this was typically part of your bring $4 to school and buy 12
Scholastic
books and get a pencil.
Book Fair.
Yeah.
The first high in gaming that I've been chasing, the dragon I've been chasing for the last 35.
I got to tell you, I was livid. So the new Fighting Fantasy books, the current line of Fighting Fantasy books, they're published by Scholastic.
Yep, sure
And when
are.
they started publishing the first few, my daughter was in elementary school, and I'm like,
So was my son.
I am getting this stuff. And when I found out they weren't carrying them in Canada, I was like, I'm writing an angry letter. I'm so angry now.
I'm going to call the school board right
This
now.
is the greatest injustice
Yeah.
in the history of the world.
You have another Fortnite player's guide here, but you don't have Shadow of the Giants in stock. Why am I even going to this book fair?
Outrageous.
Yeah, I'm
How is any of this literature?
So
I don't care what Geronimo Stilton is doing. I need some more Fighting Fantasy books.
Yeah. So to be fair, and to give you guys some background, because I think a lot of people watching this probably might not be familiar with this, and for those of you who are cheering, this is going to be old hat for you. But what these were, a lot like when you saw us playing that 2-player combat BattleTech book. If you watch that, you can watch up here in the cards. These were role-playing games that you solo operated in a choose-your-own-adventure or pick-a-path, whatever sort of like name you know it by, book system, where you would go from paragraph to paragraph and you would basically make choices that had knock-on consequences. From like a design point of view, these are actually mimicking really early video games, which were some of them were the first dial-up games. MUDs, the multi-user dungeon.
It has that same kind of Infocom.
It does.
Like original Infocom game feel.
Text-based RPGs were really popular at the time, and these were text-based RPGs that you just manually controlled. If you ever dive into how they were written, there's a fascinating like picture of like the Charlie Day style, everything's on recipe cards, way that these books got blown up into basically a number of paths, and then they were all interconnected, and they would write them visually by writing a little bit of text and then having them linked together so you could see the path to the end, and there was one path at the end, there was another path at the end. But from a childhood point of view and an imagination point of view, this was, to 8-year-old me, the greatest thing I'd ever discovered.
Oh my God. And like, honestly, the OG, like, because the new books are different, but the OG Fighting Fantasy art was the first super cool fantasy, rock and roll metal style fantasy.
It was punk. And like, I think that's probably what attracted me to it. Was I'm 8 and I'm in school and I feel like I'm doing something really grown up. I'm reading books about like like death and like these like very like it was never written in a mature way either though.
No.
Like it always approached it from a very sensible, logical, like kid safe if they're reading it.
Like looking back on it, revisiting them, yeah, there's nothing like
They're super benign.
Feels hardcore, like from a kid's point of view, but there's nothing in there that's over the line.
No, not
honestly.
at all. And what's really funny too is they eventually did do a series, which I'll show you. I'm going to overlay pictures of all this stuff you guys already noticed of like kids' first fighting fantasy books, which I have 2 of, to try and make it more digestible, basically to like a younger audience. So. The first couple books, my favorites, the first 3, written by Ian Livingstone, Steve Jackson. And so the history of those guys, if you don't know, you can go read their book Dice Men, which is a fantastic history of Games Workshop in the early days, importing D&D and many board games into the UK from all over the world. And they start writing these books. And the first 3, we've got the most famous, of course, the OG, the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, which is probably to this day... It's had multiple covers. It's probably the best series of covers of any fighting fantasy book.
I think what's also funny is when you talk to fans of these books who have played like 5 of them or 10 of them or all of them.
Yeah.
A lot of people still remember that as being the most difficult.
Definitely.
Because of the maze.
Yeah, because of the maze, and because if you did not find the 3 keys to unlock the last paragraph, basically, you couldn't get to the end. So if you missed 1 key, it's kind of like going on a video game quest where there's no backtracking, and unless you do like scum saving, where like you save before every roll or everything.
You mean the 5-finger bookmark?
That's right, yeah, the 5-finger bookmark. You couldn't go back. You could scum save in this too, which is where like you literally had all 10 of your fingers holding different pages.
You seen it, Lois. I didn't turn the page. I didn't turn the page, Lois. You seen it.
And that was my first objection to when they imported these as iPad games. I was like, how am I going to hold the paragraphs in my fingers? This is pointless. You shouldn't even play these.
Bloodbones is a ticking clock. How the hell am I supposed to complete this without cheating?
Yeah, exactly. I have to cheat. So these first 3 books really set the tone. We had The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, which is an adventurer enters into a mountain stronghold to try and find the treasure of a wizard. We have the Citadel of Chaos, which is similar with like a warlord, basically. You're trying to infiltrate and assassinate a warlord to try and like stop a war.
And you have a magic system for the first time.
And the first time ever you can cast spells and have like a mage. So you can see they're taking this idea of different types of heroes. There's even later on there's a one where you play as a thief, midnight rogue. There's a bunch of them where you play as different classes basically all through it. And then the Forest of Doom you're playing as a ranger. You're a literal ranger.
I think what's interesting too is when you go back to the original books, because the original run of books was written by Steve Jackson or Ian Livingstone, and then later they took on other authors. When you go back to the original books and you segregate them into like the Steve Jackson pile and the Ian Livingstone pile, the Ian Livingstone pile holds up today as being like all the world building for Lancia. Like there's a bit of it in the Steve Jackson books, but like Ian Livingstone was creating a game world. The Steve Jackson books, when you separate those out, they are all the books that introduced different weird mechanics
Starship
and expanded
Traveler,
the formula.
Or like
House of Hell, Citadel of Chaos with the magic system. So like it's really cool because it's one series. But you can tell the 2 authors, like one of them was coming from a very narrative place and one of them was coming from a very game design place.
Yeah, one of them's world building, which is Ian Livingstone, and Steve Jackson is really this like he's an idea guy. He's chasing an idea every book.
And I gotta say, for anybody, like I know one of the things that's popular in gaming in general now is these kind of like stripped down, simple versions of like role playing games, miniature games. To look at how basic this system is and all the stuff Steve Jackson got out of that incredibly basic system. It's amazing. 3-stat system, it's amazing.
Absolutely, it's amazing. And at the time too, it's flying in the face of all the conventional wisdom of RPG design. Where RPG design, you're looking at the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide from TSR and Gary Gygax, and it is options on options on options and charts on charts on charts and trying to give you every possible piece of information and granularity you could possibly have. Whereas these game designers were like, no, let's tell a story, and let's boil it down to 3 stats that anyone can make.
This is like when people talk rules light. This is the original rules light system from my point of view.
That's right, absolutely. So from those 3 books, like you said, other authors come on, and I don't want to turn too much into a history lesson about this because I think this is such a big topic.
Also, yeah, I got to go in like 4 hours, and I could easily go way longer than 4 hours talking about this.
We could do more than one of these, but this is the introduction. So the other thing I really want to note, because we only just touched on it, is the artists that get involved here.
Oh my God, so good.
So some of my favorite all-time, just like color pieces of art, ended up as covers for these books. You have John Blanche doing their first, I think, and only episodically linked series where your character progressed from book to book, which was the Sorcery Trilogy by Steve Jackson. Again, an innovator, right? So Steve Jackson's doing something that they haven't done before, where they link book on book on book, and if you don't find something in book 1, it affects you in book 4.
Yep.
John Blanche does all the covers for these, and they're incredible covers. And then you're on one of our favorites, House of Hell, which is a Ian Miller cover, colorized, which was, he did a lot of black and white, like pen and ink stuff, but this is a colorized Ian Miller thing, and the entire book is full of like weird, awesome, like creepy crawly art.
And that's honestly like back in the day, the tradition with role-playing books is you spent a lot of money on your cover art, getting really cool art done, and your interior art was typically B-roll.
Yeah, B-roll.
And I gotta say, the interior artists for these were outstanding. Like the Ian McCraig art, the Martin McKenna art.
Russ Nicholson is probably my favorite. Russ Nicholson does these incredible line ink drawings that they blow my mind. And like, not just art from the point of view of full page art where it's like telling you the scene, but just these little inserts where there's like a sword or a scroll.
Yeah, like a burning candle with wax dripping off it. Like it's evocative. Like I can remember how reading those books made me feel.
Absolutely. And it's steeped in that feeling, like I said, of a bit grimy, it's something that I think right now RPGs are trying to recapture. Like that feeling of like that it's almost lo-fi in that it's not designed to be like perfect and glossy. It's a bit more zine.
I think I've said this before when we've talked about other things, but I feel like this is what you get when you're not working to a style guide that homogenizes all your art, because consistently this stuff is all great.
Yeah.
But you have artists of wildly varying different styles.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's funny because we're sitting here talking about solo play, choose your own adventure books. And the point here is I want to dovetail into what we're actually going to do today, which is where they develop this into an RPG, and the link to Citadel Miniatures, which was my discovering of Games Workshop's model products and just the miniature gaming, the wargaming hobby in general, the tabletop like modeling hobby in general. I discovered there was ads in the back of these books for their other products, for associated products, because Puffin did a series called Adventure Game Books. They weren't fighting fantasy books, but they used almost an identical system and a completely identical layout that were set in ancient Greece. So by John Butterfield, David Hoenigman, and Philip Barker, we have the Cretan Chronicles. And I have the first two, At the Court of King Minos and Blood Feud of Alpheus, which are two that you hadn't seen
I've never
before.
even seen those.
They have done a bunch of advanced fighting fantasy books, and then their original plan was to have this be an RPG set that they could actually use.
And basically. The advanced fighting fantasy RPG, quick unpaid ad, is the most underrated fantasy RPG on the market today.
I would agree. Sorry, the second edition of it, because the first edition is very different.
Yes,
and written by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingston.
But the
modern one is
the current one that's out from Arian Games is super underrated, and anybody who's into fantasy RPGs should check it out.
I want to get it in print. I want to actually get like a print copy of it. I got to try and find one. But
you can get it in POD from Drive-Thru. That's where I got mine from.
That's what I'm going to have to do. Probably that's exactly what I'm going to have to do.
Buy it now. Also, I'd like a kickback.
We'll link a kickback in there. It is, but the first book, Fighting Fantasy, is an introductory RPG. They have their own monster manual called Out of the Pit, where they give you dozens and dozens of like stat blocks basically and special abilities for monsters. It's their own fiend folio / like what's it called, monster manual. They have one world book, which is called Titan, which my copy got destroyed in a rainstorm at Scout Camp when I was about, I think, like 10 or 11 years old, and I've never managed to reclaim. So if anyone's got multiple copies of Titan on a shelf, I'd love to reclaim one of the originals. Not
oh my god! And you know what? I didn't even think of this when we were talking about it before. But speaking of art, that Chris Achilleos cover for Titan
there's like
is so awesome.
It's funny because we were just talking about Chris Achilles because that white dwarf next to you is a Chris Achilles piece of art, obviously. There's at least 3 or 4 covers, I think, even just early on in this series that are Chris Achilles, and they all thank him in the front. And like the acknowledgments, it's like, this is for Chris Achilles because he agreed to do a cover for them, which I think is amazing because he's such an incredible artist. So you see them basically try their hand at turning this into an RPG. They don't really stick with it. There's the Fighting Fantasy book, which has a basic adventure and a more advanced adventure in it. And because you don't have to spend a lot of time on the rules, right, and creating rules in these books, you can spend a lot of time creating adventures. And so the adventure guides it's the same format book, are incredibly easy to operate and run. They do another adventure book called The Riddling Reaver, and then that series kind of ends. But this is where they start advertising you should use Citadel miniatures. And there's a whole section in the front of the book about you should include miniatures. It will really add to your experience. You
and way back when, that was one of the early releases from Citadel Miniatures, was they did Fighting Fantasy miniatures.
They sure did.
In those oversized clamshell packages.
I really want to try.
I know
on some of them. My thing. I think there are some Fighting Fantasy. So Fighting Fantasy Fest happens every year in the UK, and they've done some miniatures for it every year. They did Zagor, the wizard from Warlock of Firetop Mountain.
Balthus Dyer.
They did Balthus Dyer, who is the bad guy from City of Thieves. I think they did Nicodemus.
No, Balthus Dyer's
Citadel of Chaos. Sorry, Zambar Bone is the one from City of Thieves. That's right. And then they also did 2 novels, The Trolltooth Wars and Demon Slayer, which I also have, that are of middling quality. They're not terrible. There's a series called The Trolltooth Wars. I don't think it went past Demon Slayer.
I don't remember. I remember them existing.
Yes, I read them. They're okay.
For all my vivid memories of how cool all this other stuff was, I remember them existing.
That's right. And then I think kind of not dissatisfied, but wanting more from their system and wanting to like expand themselves a bit. Then they do the advanced Fighting Fantasy books. They do Dungeoneer, which is the initial one, Black Sand, and Alancia, which is the one I'm missing, and again was destroyed in that same rainstorm with my copy of Titan. These introduce some of the mechanics I think you really liked, which is your skill can have sub-skills. And sub-skills basically are things that you get to do better or worse. So like your skill is a basic stat block. If you're really good with a Warhammer, your Warhammer skill adds to your skill when you use a Warhammer.
I think the big thing was that across the Fighting Fantasy books, for the most part, a few of those class things aside, like your class felt like adventurer. Like you kind of had this broadly, similarly applied set of abilities to everything. And the advanced Fighting Fantasy thing basically let you specialize a bit more.
Into classes.
So you still had like core things that everybody could do, and everybody was whatever level of competence they were at.
Yeah, they have 2 hands.
But then you could be extra fighty, or you could be extra sneaky, or you could be extra whatever you want to be.
Cast spells, or whatever it was going to be. And so that leads us to probably having to talk about the stat block, and it is 3 stats. There's skill, which is just a catch-all term for how good you are at doing anything. And in these books, the Choose Your Own Adventure books, it was everything. So a high skill basically meant you would survive or not till the end. There was your stamina, which is how many points of damage you could take. It would occasionally come into play for other things too, where like if you were swimming, they would come up, but it was usually on the fly. They would come up with like, you need to like make it across this stretch of desert. It's going to take you a week. Here's how you have to like check your stamina.
Yeah, because it wasn't one of those things you did a die roll against, like whereas you did with skill or luck.
Yeah, and if you did, it was like they on the fly would make like a mechanic to apply your stamina to. And my favorite thing was like they had a real high opinion of food in this. Every time you sat down to eat, you just felt better. You're just fine. You get stabbed in the face. I'm gonna have a snack. Fine. You can snack in the middle of a fight. That was my favorite.
If you were 12 years old when you were reading these things, getting healthier worked exactly the way you actually thought it did, because there was no benefit in sleeping or resting. Screw that. That's a waste of time.
That's right. We're on adventures.
But if you could shove some more Cheetos down your gob, you were good to go. Right. That's medicine.
Another bag of chips. Let's have another bag of chips and we're going to go fight.
Bring me some Doritos.
Snickers really satisfies, baby. And then there was luck. And I think luck is my favorite stat in that core stat block, because I think it's the one that is the most interesting. It was a depleting supply, so every time you would test your luck, either being forced to by the game or choosing to, because you could choose to in fights as well, to like do additional damage or avoid damage, you rolled 2 dice equal to or under your stat, and every time you did that, your stat would go down by 1.
Yeah.
So it became less likely you would get lucky all the time.
You would literally run out of luck.
You would run out of luck, exactly. And like, using it to your advantage, like if you had a high stat of luck to like do an extra 2 points of damage to somebody when you hit them and kill them immediately, was more of like an impatience thing, right? If you got impatient, or if you're fighting a big boss, and then later on, if you slip and your ass test your luck by the book, you would not have your luck left basically, and then fall into a gorge and die.
Yeah, which I always felt was like the learning curve part of the like the mechanical side for a kid playing them, because kill the ogre faster. Yeah, I'm going to spend my luck on that. And you only did that a certain number of times before you realized, every time that the book asked me to test, I'm just going to straight up die.
Before a runaway wagon on the street crushes you, basically. Exactly. You don't get out of the way fast enough. And I think that was, it's the most interesting mechanic because it's the one you have the most choice over, because you can use it anytime you want. And it's also, the way it operates is reflective of narratively how it is. It felt the most RPG to me of like the 3 stat blocks.
Yeah, and it's the most, it feels like it's the most cost benefit mechanic in the game.
Absolutely. So then this stuff goes kind of dormant for a while. Yeah. It really did sort of like, I think, not fade away, but I think it was of its time. Right? It was a time where if you had access to a computer, you could participate in these same text-based RPGs. If you had access to early video game console, you could kind of visually interact with them. Because even early like RPGs that I can think of on home entertainment systems, like the like early like Sierra like text adventures, or the like King's Quest, Police Quest, Space Quest, or the like early like Nintendo Entertainment System ones like Legend of Zelda. They're more visually interactive than they are text interactive, and there's still a certain amount of like moving around and doing like dexterity stuff versus the theater of the mind that these represented.
I think the other thing too is when you roll out a ton of product in a fairly short window of time, like you've got one, like when something's new like that, you've got one group of people playing it. Mm-hmm. And with something like this, I think there's a tendency for people to feel like they've aged out of it. Like, maybe you get to be 13, 14 years old and you think, I'm too old. I'm too cool for these choose your own adventure books. And then you get to be like 25, 30 and you're like, I unironically miss my choose your own adventure books. I want them back.
I want them back. Exactly. And so what happens is I think the lifespan, just roughly, I'm not going to go and look it up as I'm on this thing. I did look it up earlier, but roughly the lifespan of this sort of property being as hot as it was mid-80s to mid-90s. Yep. And between those two times, or early 80s to mid-90s, and between those two times, they are really popular to the point where they penetrate into like the school system, the library system. Yep. In North America. They come across the pond in North America and become like very popular. And there used to be ads on all of them, like how many, it was like I think it was almost like over 8 million copies sold worldwide. There was like a banner ad at the back, basically.
Better than the Big Mac.
Better than the Big Mac at the time. Yeah. 8 million copies of these books. And Puffin, of course, being a fairly major, like especially kids publisher here, got them into places I think they normally wouldn't be. So then we come around to, I think you and I, around the time you and I meet, which is when we're at Workshop, and this book comes out. I think it came out probably in 2008 or 2009.
It was definitely earlier than that, I think.
The 25th anniversary? Are you sure? I think it was 08.
I want to say it was earlier than that.
It was 07.
Oh, there you go. Sweet.
It was 07. And this was the 25th anniversary edition of this book.
So here's the thing. You want to talk market penetration.
Yeah.
Where did you get your copy?
I got my copy, I think, at like the Chapters Indigo down the street from the old office in Oakville.
I got mine in a grocery store.
For real?
For real. Like, I got mine. I was living in Edmonton. I got that. I was literally walking through the grocery store. Probably hadn't bought a fighting fantasy book in 10 years. And I was like, there's a hardcover fighting fantasy book.
Yep.
In the grocery store next to all the best Harlequin romance, Zane Grey, and Mac Bolan novels.
Yep. And they reprint it with the original cover in hardcover, which I love the fact that it's in hardcover. It makes me so happy it's in hardcover.
I posted a picture of this 2 nights ago, or a night ago, I can't remember, but as we're recording this, like a night or two ago, with pictures of miniatures. And the very first reaction I got was from a friend of mine who was like, that book's in hardcover?
Yeah, it's freaking out. How do you have a hardcover of this? And this book, this 25th anniversary edition, has some additional stuff in it too. There's some maps. There's a cool.
Oh my god, I love that map so much.
There's a cool prehistory of Games Workshop too from Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson as like an annotation, and it's clearly made with love. So if in 2007 this is 25 years old, right? Do the math.
No,
we're in.
I'm not doing the math. I'm not doing the math.
So literally,
I'm going to turn to dust like a picture of Dorian Gray right in front of you.
This is sitting on Jay's desk, and I walk in, and I've got one of these that I then put on my desk. And this was the Double Dragon moment where I'm like, "Hey," it was my version of like someone wearing like or having like a. We talked about this in a couple of these. I think in all of these now so far, when someone has like a game or a Warhammer tattoo, and you're like, "We could be friends." It's like a weird a dog whistle. So now 2007, 2023, it's 16 years later, and last year, 2 years ago, 15 years later, 2022, they have the 40th anniversary, and these two books come out. And these are written by the original authors.
Yeah.
So we have Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone both writing books, which are new editions of Fighting Fantasy. I think in between then, when this 25th anniversary edition got done, there was a little bit of like a renaissance. It's not done by Puffin anymore.
Is it Wizard or something
Wizard.
like that?
Yeah,
yeah. Because I think because I have a bunch of these in my collection where I think right after that came out, they printed a bunch that were slightly larger format, like the size of the new ones,
size format,
with like kind of a gray faux metal spine.
Yep.
And they were just the original books republished, and they removed the rules to the back.
Yep.
And they all had sample characters in them, which was kind of neat.
So you could just quick play,
yeah,
which was cool. My only thing I didn't like was they lost all the original cover art rights. So most of them don't have the original cover art. They have new cover art.
Oh no, you know what it was? They had the weird cameo thing where it was like the cover image was like
basically
15% of the cover.
Yeah.
And the rest of it,
And it's all new art.
I do still like them. I got to be honest.
I don't mind. I'm not mad at them, but it's not my Fighting Fantasy.
But those reprints, because those are new. But in that line, there's also reprints.
Yeah.
And those ones have all new interior art.
Yeah,
and I know that has landed flat with a lot of fans. Yeah. I thought the disappointing thing was if they were going to do all new art for those books, that they didn't do different art. So like what they did was they did new versions of the same images instead of illustrating other things from the books, which I thought was a weird choice, to be fair.
Yeah. Whereas these two books have the same tone and style of art as the originals because it's Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson. So when you see the art in these two original new books, it is very much, actually, I think some of them are even original artists. Who's the artist for this map? Ryan McGee. And this one's published by Scholastic, obviously, not by Wizard, so it's a different publisher too.
These new ones are all the Scholastic ones.
Yep. And the art is... they still own the trademark too, which I think is great in Fighting Fantasy. The interior... I'm trying to find the actual, like, attribution for the illustrations. I don't see it anywhere. Scholastic, text by Ian Livingstone, cover and illustrations by Mike McCarthy, and Ian Livingstone, and the map illustrations by Ryan McGee. So the covered inside illustrations are Mike McCarthy. Yeah, so there's tons of these illustrations, and they're in that similar sort of like black and white pen and ink style, which I think is so iconic of Fighting Fantasy. Yeah. So why did I want to talk about this today? Well, frankly, there wouldn't be a GMG without these books. Like, there just wouldn't be. Without me discovering Citadel Miniatures through reading these books and like having like a lifelong like love affair with imagination, I think that these books are massively...
Well, hell, go bigger than that, too. There wouldn't be a Games Workshop without these books.
There would not be a Games Workshop without these books. It's true, because these paid... I think a lot of the bills back then. Like this was Ian Livingstone, Steve Jackson's like big success story prior to them collaborating with Citadel Miniatures and becoming Games Workshop the way we know Games Workshop today, not as just a retail chain selling books and toys and stuff like that. So that's I think it's an important piece of history. It's important to talk about. Now, because these are back in publication, obviously from Scholastic, you can find copies of these and you should go check them out. They are great. I think as a parent, I will say they are great young adult bedtime reading. You can get a lot of miles of these if you like reading with your kids. You can get a ton of like miles reading these books out loud to them. And if you really, really, really want to get your kids into role playing, reading these out loud is effectively just a pre-made fantasy adventure that they can get into immediately. And you can add as many characters as you want to this. I'll be honest, I've played a couple of these books now with my kids where they just both create characters and we just take turns when they fight monsters and stuff like that. It does nothing to like. It won't make the game any easier or harder, basically. No. It's fine. It's very easy to dive into and very easy to like digest.
Welcome to the world of Rules Light, right? Yeah, like, absolutely. It's amazing how forgiving that stuff is.
Yeah. And actually, what's funny is I think the first ever Zoom RPG with your gaming crew that I participated in was a fighting fantasy one.
Oh yeah, we were playing one of the adventures that John Mark Hicks wrote.
That's right. Yeah, I think Darren GM'd it, and you and me, and who else played in that one?
I think I ran it. I think it was.
Oh no, you did run it. That's right. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the title now. It was The Inn of Lost Hope.
The Inn of Lost Hope. That's right. It was just like a perfect like spooky like one room sort of like adventure.
Yeah, it was like a haunted inn.
Haunted inn. Yeah,
it was great.
It was very good. It was very, very good. Oh no, it was Darren did what was it? One of the games whose I think art style is the most like this that I've ever played was Dungeon Crawl Club.
Oh, Dungeon Crawl.
Darren ran DCC for us, and that was a huge amount of fun too. So if you love that sort of like kind of punk, kind of metal, like game stuff. And actually, for the last thing is collecting these books, you're probably better off trying to find the new ones than trying to buy the old ones right now. Because Jay and I were just lamenting that they've dried up in used bookstores. These used to be everywhere in used bookstores. And the problem is that everyone our age has tried to collect their
Why didn't I appreciate that more when that was an opportunity?
Yeah, I kept my greatest hits, but I got rid of tons of them.
Current me hates the hell out of past me right now.
Exactly. And to try and find them secondhand, they are because they were so like handled, the copies aren't in great shape because it's a book that you literally would like fold the spine over and do a bunch of things with. So the quality of what you find secondhand market is going to be very like all over the place.
Most of my green spine books, they're in a condition that I would be upset if I saw somebody do that to any book these days. And it's like, oh, I did that.
Yeah, I did that. Exactly. My Out of the Pit and my two Advanced Fighting Fantasy books, the condition is well loved. They would not get any money on a secondhand market because they are I love them to death, but they are beat up. I think the one thing that I will say about these books though is they hold together.
Oh yeah.
Like the quality of the printing is super high and they hold together like crazy.
And you wouldn't guess that because when you handle the books, like the paper quality is like old school, like one level above newsprint. It feels like, but they are
tough as hell.
They are indestructible. They show their wear, but they are indestructible.
One of the things I was thinking about doing is I do have doubles of some that are in like completely piss poor condition. I was thinking about scalpeling out all the one pages and framing them. Because if you like collecting art, some of your favorite 80s and 90s fantasy artists have incredible pieces of art like hidden in these books.
Well, except you have to give me your list of duplicates first.
Oh yeah. Before I do that, before I do that. Sorry, because we're gonna do some tradesies. This has dug up some emotions for both of us.
And I got to say on that same note, because I mentioned this to Ash before we started recording, if you were into all these old books and this kind of rekindles you and makes you think I would be stoked about doing this again, and you're looking at the new books. Please get Port of Peril. It is a walking tour of like the first 4-ish Ian Livingstone books. It's nostalgia for these things in book format. It's great.
Yeah, it's you walking around basically going to all the original places that you visited.
I know that guy.
Yeah.
I've been in that store before.
It's an amusement park ride of like, I'm going to go visit Nicodemus under the bridge. It's going to be great. All right, well, guys, we are going to play the Fighting Fantasy RPG. Jay,
I'm so excited about this.
I'm going to run Jay through Fighting Fantasy. There is a introductory RPG in this book. We're going to do a separate video, so you can watch that also today. Basically, I didn't want to have this talk make the video super long, and it'll be a separate one. I'll link it in the cards as well, and you guys can watch us play this. We'll use miniatures. I've dug up appropriate miniatures for what he may face in here, and I have a great book of like dungeon-y terrain, basically, that we flip open so that we can have ourselves go through. But I'm going to make Jay draw a map. I hope you brought paper and pencil, 2 dice and an eraser. He's got what he needs for adventure.
I'm ready to rock.
Oh, buddy, you're going to be the hero. So, big thanks.
I got to tell you, the danger for this is about to turn into our Drive to Survive series, right? Like this is going to be like 800 4-hour episodes.
We have a bunch of this we can go through. It's going to be great. So tell us what you think in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this rang some bells for some people because I think this was a big part of a lot of people's like discovering the tabletop hobby and playing like RPGs and stuff like that. And so we're gonna dive into Fighting Fantasy. You can check it out again today. It'll be up at the same time. Thanks for watching. Till next time, Ash. Happy gaming.